Video games are a controversial topic. It's not much if they're out or not, or if they're important all of a sudden, it's not even the people behind the game anymore. What sparks more controversy and debate in video games these days seem to be change. Long-running franchises change after a while, and whether the change is good or bad aside, this change seems to be the basis for every online discourse ever. For more about this topic, watch Jay Review's video on the matter, as he does a great job explaining both sides of the argument, and because this isn't what I want to talk about. I want to talk about something else which wouldn't leave my mind ever since I watched Jay Review's video. A franchise which, I'd argue, make a compelling argument for each side of the change debate. And also one which deserves some love for God's sake. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Rayman. If any of you youngsters don't recognize this video game icon right away, that might be because the latest Rayman game came out 10 years ago and hasn't been seen since. Yes, I'm aware of the Mario Rabbids DLC, but we'll get to that later. To those who are unfamiliar with the limbless thingamajig, Rayman made his debut in 1995 on basically everything which existed at the time. He got 4 more big releases, a spin-off, a weirdest TV show which was canned after only 4 episodes, and we'll get to this later. Rayman has always been a franchise which was appreciated by audiences and critics. Even Rayman 3, which people say is the weakest, received great reviews and is still well loved. And yet, it's not often brought up in conversation when people talk about acclaimed franchises. And this was even before the franchise went dormant. Both times it went dormant. Rayman is in this weird limbo where he is big enough to be recognized by the industry, but it also seems to be forgotten like some other unappreciated gems. If looking at my avatar gives you the impression I'm too lazy to draw a character with limbs, well, you're right, but actually no. It's a Rayman throwback. I'm wearing my appreciation for the limbless hero on my online identity, and I do so in pride. Besides Sonic the Hedgehog, Rayman is a character which influenced my life in many ways. My taste in games, art style, sense of humor, even personality. Again, why do you think this avatar looks like it does? But unlike Sonic, which people recognize and know at least one thing about, even if they haven't experienced any particular version, Rayman is barely recognized, and it does bring up the question, what even is Rayman? It's a platformer series by Ubisoft, is probably the general answer most of you are going to say, and yeah, you're right. But on a more specific note, Rayman isn't a franchise that's consistent, I guess is the word. Not in terms of quality, mind you, but in terms of identity. While the games are without a doubt platformers, each one is different from the other in various ways. The first game is a 2D side-scroller built around slow platforming and tactical approach to obstacles. The second game is a 3D adventure platformer with focus on puzzles and platforming challenges and occasional fighting. The third game is a 3D platformer with more focus on fighting and racking up combos, with puzzles being sprinkled here and there. Origins and Legends are the only 2 games in the main series which are the same, but being fast-paced and reaction-based 2D platformers. And for the record, the fact no game is like the other is basically by design. Michel Ancel, Rayman's creator and pedestal breaker, claimed that if a Rayman game isn't different and surprising to the audience, then it's just not Rayman for him. Each game is meant to be different from the other, I assume in order to avoid stagnation. But it brings up an interesting point regarding franchise shakeups and the endless debates they spark. As I mentioned at the start of the video, every long-running franchise is going to involve somewhat of a formula shakeup. That's just how things are going to be sometimes. Now, whether or not a change ends up good or not is a different story, and sometimes it can come up to personal preference if nothing else, but notice how video game franchises are now being categorized as eras. God of War now has the Greek and Norse eras, which is fair as they take place and draw inspirations from different mythologies, but it's also because the gameplay is different between the two. The series still consists of combat-heavy and story-based action games with some platforming and puzzles, but the tone, controls, and even the overall gameplay system are different from each other. Other franchises go through this too. Resident Evil, Final Fantasy, and of course Sonic the Hedgehog. But when those franchises switch up the cool gameplay style and the times go by, the debates grow on which era is better, and this causes the above mentioned controversies regarding what is even a valid entry in a franchise anymore. To bring back Jay Reviews' video for a second, he mentions that what counts as a Sonic game today is a game starring Sonic the Hedgehog in which you go fast, and besides that there's nothing concrete because the formula has been tweaked so many times and that's what's causing all the fandom wars. That's a very fair point, which I personally agree on for the record. But then I asked myself, why aren't there any fandom wars regarding the Rayman series when almost each new game shook up the formula? Yes, there will be the one who thinks Rayman 3 destroyed everything, or that Rayman Origins regressed the franchise, but for the most part, people just accept Rayman's lack of coherent style. Why is that? Maybe it's because Rayman is a more niche franchise and less known. Is it because Rayman is more consistent when it comes to game quality? Or maybe it's because we're starving for content that will take everything we can get. All of those are probably true, but I think I have something else. Rayman's lack of a core identity is part of what makes him special. Let's assume someone picks up a Rayman game without seeing any trailers or reading any interviews. What could he expect from it? It has the character of Rayman and it will be a platformer, but would it be 2D or 3D? Is the focus going to be on platforming or combat? Would it be more tactical or faster paced? What about the tone of the story? Are we going for cartoony and simple, dark and gloomy, cynical and funny? You can't really know. Each game could be completely different, and what you get could be exactly what you were looking for, or surprise you entirely. Some would call it a lack of identity, but I call it the true secret of Rayman's charm. As a whole, we're talking about a very competent series of 5 games, with each being a great one to play and providing a great time. But as individuals? Well, it can really depend on your taste. Do you like hard as balls platformers which will challenge you until you cry? Rayman 1 is the challenge you've been looking for. Do you want a grand adventure which balances platforming, puzzles, combat, and will make sure to have enough variety to keep you engrossed? Rayman 2 will answer all of those and then some. Feeling like relaxing and killing a bunch of enemies with fun power-ups and a sick soundtrack? Rayman 3 would give you the action and thrill you seek and even make you laugh. And if you're looking for a decent challenge, gorgeous visuals, and the ability to play with friends, Rayman Origins and Legends will be there to satisfy the needs and make every night one to remember. There may not be a core identity to this series, and yes, someone liking one game might not guarantee they'll like the other, but this variety is what puts Rayman over a lot of other franchises for me. It keeps it fresh and unique, and whenever a game does change up the formula, it keeps the gameplay tight and strong and is always of quality. People may not talk about it much in the bigger conversation, but you know what, maybe they should. We should celebrate a franchise which reinvented itself with almost every game and show that mixing up the formula isn't as big a problem as some say it is, if the game is strong enough to support it, and yeah, Rayman's games were always good enough to support themselves, even if they were different. And yet, this lack of identity, which makes Rayman so unique and special, might also be what led to his downfall. I mentioned I'll get to it at some point, right? Rayman Raving Rabbids. A game which I'm sure every Rayman fan who respect themselves load with every fiber of their being. Not because it's bad, it's a decent minigame collection I guess, but because it wasn't what we were promised. Long story short, it was supposed to be Rayman's 4th platforming adventure before it turned into a minigame collection with a bunch of rabbits who quickly took over the spotlight. Of course, hindsight is 2020 and we now know better than we did back then, but we eventually bought a game which wasn't what we wanted, nor what we were promised. When it was released, I remember just accepting Raving Rabbids for what it was. It wasn't what I was promised, but it was fun and provided some good memories, and I knew the next game would be on the way, and maybe there will be more to my liking. I was so wrong! Not long after came Raving Rabbids 2, and Raving Rabbids TV Party. Remember how I mentioned earlier that picking up a Rayman game would be like a surprise and how each one would be different? Doesn't apply anymore. If you saw the rabbit's name in the title, you knew it was going to be a minigame collection. And most definitely not a Rayman game. Didn't you say that every Rayman game is different though? Yeah, but I also said they were all platformers. You jumped, used your fists to fight and break cages, flew with your helicopter hair, and used the palm to solve all your problems. Raving Rabbids doesn't have any of those. And when the two sequels push Rayman more into the sidelines and don't evolve or keep the formula fresh, that's not Rayman anymore. He may be there, but that's not his spirit. He's there because the poor boy needs a job. You know what, let's talk about Rayman Arena for a second, or Rayman M in some regions. That game was a spin-off. I think everyone can agree. But not only was it advertised as a spin-off, it actually had more to do with the spirit of Rayman than Raving Rabbids did, and that was advertised as a main freaking entry. You jumped, you used your fists to attack and flip switches, you climbed, hovered, that's Rayman. It might have been a spin-off, but it was for one honest about it, and there was more of Rayman's DNA in it than all three Raving Rabbids games. With the split of the two franchises, the Rabbids had... who the fuck is counting how many games? While Rayman had 2. Not counting mobile games anyway. Origins may have brought another shift as stated, but Legends kept the same core as its predecessor. It still had plenty of new things about it, make no mistake. And if you ask me, it's the better of the two games. However, it wasn't a complete change in gameplay and focus like the other games were. There are zero problems with it for the record. But I felt it was important to note because maybe they realized Rayman did need a core identity in order for him to stick around. This is a franchise which changed itself so much to the point no one really questioned why we suddenly got a minigame collection. At least at first, we didn't know any better. We just bought it, accepted it, and realized the weight of the mistake only much later. Looking back, maybe the idea with Legends was to give Rayman much more of an identity and a formula, so we would know what a Rayman game is. Well, that doesn't matter much now, is it? Considering our limbless hero is waiting for his next big shot. Yes, I'm aware of his DLC appearance in Mario Rabbids, but here's the thing. This is a strategy game, and I'm not into those. Not to say it won't be good or it can be fun, and don't you dare assume I don't enjoy seeing Rayman back, even if slightly. But the genre doesn't appeal to me, and once again, they're locking Rayman behind something he's not. Is it the lack of identity thing or Ubisoft being assholes? I don't know. But Raving Rabbids is a mistake I'm not willing to make again. Let's assume this DLC does well, which I hope it does. What would it mean for Rayman? Would he get another shot in a platformer, or would he turn into a strategy game? Maybe I'm overthinking it, but you saw what happened last time and I don't want history to repeat itself. That is of course if Ubisoft are actually testing water regarding an eventual comeback, and they're not just using the name to make more money. I guess we won't know until after the DLC is out, and despite it not being a genre I like, I'm hoping for the best. I want Rayman to do well after all. Honestly, all of this talk about Rayman just made me miss him more. Luckily, I can always come back to any of the other games whenever I want, and if a new proper game ever comes out, I'll be there day one. But until that game comes, I'll continue enjoying each of the previous entries for what they were and continue to praise them for not only holding up extremely well, but for also showing a franchise can change its ways and still be the same. You can have your preferences, but keep it civil and realize it can all come down to personal taste. And despite never being exactly the same each time, it still showed us what happens when you stray too far away from what's established. Rayman is a unique series. In a world where tropes are taking over and becoming more and more dominant, we need a reminder that being unique isn't bad, and just because something is different doesn't mean it's not worth our time. We need Rayman to come back as what he always was, A platformer series which was never afraid to change focuses, still stuck to its roots, and kept the quality up with each entry. Whenever a new game like this is out, I will be there. Please bring back Rayman already. And not as a DLC.